I have day one starting 2022 with Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, main event. Brock Lesnar comes to the ring with Paul Heyman. It is very clear now who's on whose side. While Paul Heyman did, and this is why it's important, right? Because we're going to see this kind of babyface version of Paul Heyman that we really hadn't seen before. Like, we haven't seen this version of Paul Heyman, really. We haven't seen, even though he's a bad guy still, we haven't seen the Roman Reigns version of Paul Heyman before. The version of Paul Heyman that's intimidated of the person that he's representing. So now we're going to see this babyface version of Paul Heyman. And in order for Paul Heyman to be a babyface, he has to speak basically the way he spoke on SmackDown both last week and 2 weeks ago before he got punched in the face by Roman Reigns, explaining that he truly was trying to protect the tribal chief. His job is and was to protect the tribal chief. And he knew what Brock Lesnar had in store, and he knew he had to protect the tribal chief. Now, the fact that Roman Reigns got offended by that and fired Paul Heyman makes Roman a bad guy, because Paul Heyman never lied and never didn't do his job. Paul Heyman didn't turn on Roman Reigns by siding with Brock Lesnar. Roman Reigns turned on Paul Heyman because he felt that Paul Heyman did not have faith in him. So that's very, very important. That's key to the way this thing is unraveling. Now, at day one, I think at this point, a lot of people expect Roman Reigns to win because Roman Reigns doesn't show up on pay-per-view and lose titles. It doesn't happen. And I think a lot of people are expecting this whole thing to be a swerve. I think you don't go that way. I think we start day one of 2022 with Brock Lesnar beating Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns loses the Universal title to Brock Lesnar at day one, and Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar celebrate together. Now, this is still, and all the roles are still intact. Roman Reigns is still a bad guy. Brock Lesnar is still a good guy. Paul Heyman is still a good guy, along with Brock Lesnar. And and Heyman shows up with Brock on SmackDown, the first SmackDown of the new year, to kind of take a victory lap, to say, I told you so. We're back to the days of Paul Heyman in the ring with Brock Lesnar cutting these promos. But it's the Brock Lesnar of new that we're seeing, not the Brock Lesnar of old. It's Brock Lesnar with a pony nub and some overalls and a cut-off flannel, and he's smiling, and Paul Heyman is smiling, and everybody's cheering, and everybody's having a good time. Roman is furious. Roman is throwing stuff. Roman is being abusive again, right? There's a little less, it's not quite as cohesive with Roman and the Usos. The bloodline is starting to show signs of deterioration because Roman's mentality is showing signs of deterioration. He's not good with dealing with loss, especially this version of Roman Reigns. So Brock disappears. Brock's not showing up to SmackDown every week. Brock is gone until the Royal Rumble. And Roman isn't getting a match at the Royal Rumble because Roman was so abusive with his power over all the officials. It's pointed out that Roman was very, very abusive with Adam Pearce, with Sonya Deville. He doesn't have Paul Heyman fighting his battles anymore, and Jimmy and Jey Uso are simply not the negotiators that Paul Heyman is. There's a reason that Paul Heyman has the job that he has. So Roman Reigns quickly figures out that the only way to get to WrestleMania is to enter and win the Royal Rumble. So that's exactly what he's going to do. Roman Reigns enters the Royal Rumble, and the eye rolls start coming already. People already forecast, okay, I see what's going to happen here. Roman goes to the Rumble and wins the Rumble, and we get to WrestleMania, and we got Roman versus Brock. Not so fast, because we get to the Royal Rumble, and Roman does go all the way. And I've got some other notes for what may happen at the Royal Rumble this year, and there's lots of stuff that's going to go on in that match. WWE is at this place where it's time to not only establish people, but to build new stars. And I think the Royal Rumble match is a place where that can happen. I think that this Royal Rumble match could have the ability to maybe not have as heroic an ending as 2020's Royal Rumble did, but certainly with all the moving parts, this can be a classic Royal Rumble. And the ending to this classic Royal Rumble it's almost poetry. It's Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, the last two men in the 2022 Royal Rumble, and Seth Rollins eliminates Roman. Roman cannot believe it. He's beside himself. Quite frankly, Seth Rollins can't believe it either, because this isn't heroic Seth Rollins. This is Weasley drip god Seth Rollins. This is heel Seth Rollins. It's heel versus heel at the end of this Royal Rumble. And Seth Rollins wins the Royal Rumble. He now puts his sights on Big E. Because at day one, with all the arguments going on as to who is the rightful challenger to Big E's championship between Lashley and Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins just won the Royal Rumble. Seth Rollins has it cemented. Maybe Big E beat Bobby Lashley or Kevin Owens at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, but Seth isn't worried about it because Seth is going to WrestleMania to face Big E. Now, in the meantime, yes, we know how WWE works. Roman is able to find a way to get to WrestleMania. Once Seth declares that Big E is the guy that he's going after, and Roman wants that badly. Roman badly wants Seth to declare Big E as his opponent. Not because he's worried about Seth, but because Roman doesn't want the WWE Championship. Roman wants Brock, and Roman wants that blue belt back. He wants his Universal Championship back. And he's going to get it, whether it be, I don't know if they're doing the Elimination Chamber in February. Maybe Roman will win a gauntlet. Roman may have to go through every superstar on the SmackDown roster. And that might be a thing to do. Have Roman Reigns literally beat everybody. Every week on TV, Roman's got a different match. Every live event, Roman's got a different match. And he's got to beat everybody on SmackDown. And he does. And he goes to WrestleMania. I mean, that's just an idea I just had off the top of my head right now. That's not actually my concrete booking. That's just something I'm throwing at you. But Roman goes to WrestleMania, and he has his match with Brock Lesnar. Now, what's been going on, because Roman doesn't have Paul Heyman at his side, and because he lost the Royal Rumble, and we've now started to watch Roman fight, and Roman fight, and Roman fight, what we're noticing is there is a groundswell of support growing for Roman Reigns, that we see that this is the version of Roman that we've been looking for. We're figuring out how to craft this ideal version of Roman Reigns that we've had over the last year and a half, the best by a mile, into a babyface that people are supporting. That's what's happened. He's not just getting victory after victory after victory, and we feel like morons because we can clearly tell who they want us to cheer for. Instead, he's lost big matches now. He lost to Brock at day one, and he lost to Seth in the Rumble match. And over the course from January until March, watching this guy fight for that Brock Lesnar match, we start to build up a support for him. So we do go to WrestleMania. And we do have Brock and Paul Heyman. And from the course of day one until WrestleMania, Brock and Paul have become less and less fun, right? Right after day one, all of January, it's pretty much a blast. You know what I mean? We're just having a good time. But we start to see, it's a real slow shift. But we start to realize very, very subtly, we don't have a full turn going into WrestleMania. We don't have a full Roman is a babyface, Brock Lesnar is a heel again turn, because that would be very, very cheesy. We've seen it before. But instead, we've got this thing where the things that we loved about Brock, we're seeing less of. And the things that we love about Roman, we're seeing more of. And there's just this feeling inside where it's like, I think I kind of want Roman to win. I think I kind of, and it's important that Brock is not on TV very much, because we start to get annoyed again about the fact that we as fans don't have a champion who's on TV. So all those things coming into play, it leads to WrestleMania. It's Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, Brock with Paul Heyman in his corner. Roman Reigns beats Brock Lesnar. Roman Reigns conquers the beast. He defeats Brock Lesnar. He gets the championship. And the real moment for WrestleMania is Paul Heyman stepping in the ring and clapping for Roman like we did it. Hook, line, and sinker, Roman. You and I, over the course of months and months and months, you and I did it. Let's get the bloodline back together. Boom! Heyman gets knocked out again. Superman punch to Heyman as Roman Reigns and the Usos stand victoriously in the ring, holding up the title for the first time, truly with fans believing, Roman, you earned it. That's the key. when he knocks out Paul Heyman, we as fans can see that this character has finally earned that title that he held on to so tightly for so long. The night or the SmackDown after WrestleMania, we realized something. Drew McIntyre never got his shot. Drew McIntyre was not in the contendership. Drew McIntyre wasn't even in the Royal Rumble match. He never got his shot. Drew turns on Roman. Coming off of WrestleMania, Roman is a full-time babyface. Drew McIntyre turns heel after WrestleMania on SmackDown and attacks Roman Reigns. So coming off of WrestleMania, it's Drew versus Roman. Roman is the good guy. Drew is the bad guy. And Paul Heyman is nowhere to be found. Paul Heyman gets knocked off at WrestleMania, and he's off TV until we get to Money in the Bank. Keep in mind, Money in the Bank is a stadium show this year. Big, big deal. It's not a typical Money in the Bank. So not only are we going to have 2 Money in the Bank matches, but you need to have a mega main event. And for this mega main event, Roman defeats Drew in a singles match, but Drew is not done with Roman. Because Drew said, Roman, I decided to get some friends. And Paul Heyman comes out. And it's like, oh, don't tell me that Drew and Paul Heyman have joined forces. And Roman is making that face that Roman makes. Like, are you serious? This is what you think is going to help you? I don't care if Paul Heyman is by your side. I beat you, Drew. Paul Heyman's been by my side. And then boom, 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 boom. Here comes Brock. Brock is back months later. And Drew and Brock hit the ring, throw the Usos out of there, and put a beat down on Roman Reigns. Paul Heyman is laughing because he realizes that, look, maybe Roman can, on a good night, beat Brock Lesnar. But Brock and Drew combined with the leadership of Paul Heyman is an unbeatable team. Talk about a 2-man power trip. And Drew and Brock spend a little bit of time on SmackDown just tearing everybody up until Roman Reigns says, hey, Paul, I have a partner too, and I'm going to the Bloodlines. And Paul goes, Roman, look, I love you. I love your family. But even in a handicap match, you and Jimmy, you and Jay, you and Jimmy and Jay are not going to be able to take on Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar. Besides that, when we attacked you, we put Jimmy and Jay on the shelf. You couldn't invite Jimmy and Jay if you wanted to. And Roman goes, Paul, I want you to know, there's nothing I would love more than to invite Jimmy and Jay to whoop your ass with me. But you're right. You did put them on the shelves. I guess they each have an individual shelf. But that's not where my family tree ends. Check out the screen. They turn around. Boom! There's The Rock's big face on the screen. If you smell. Oh, no. Paul Heyman goes, no. And the announcement is made. Money in the Bank 2022. The main event. Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman in their corner versus the Bloodline, Roman Reigns and The Rock. Roman Reigns and The Rock on the same team versus Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre. That fills a stadium. We get there and we can't believe it. We could probably get 1, maybe 2 SmackDowns, probably 1. Maybe 1 SmackDown, maybe the go-home show. We get out of The Rock. But he does join us via satellite several times. And we get to the pay-per-view, and we have it. The Rock is looking amazing. He's looking huge. He's got the Brahma Bull on the back of his tights. Roman Reigns is looking huge. Drew McIntyre looking huge. Brock Lesnar looking huge, as only Brock Lesnar can. Just massive amounts of man in the ring. And what a match we see. Just fisticuffs all over the place until finally at the end, the rock bottom is landed on Roman Reigns. The Rock turns on Roman Reigns. What are we seeing? Brock Lesnar starts laughing. Drew McIntyre looks very confused. Paul Heyman starts laughing. All of a sudden, we realize when Paul Heyman gets in the ring and shake hands with The Rock, that Paul Heyman's ties with the Anoa'i family go a lot deeper than we're even aware of. Now, you want compelling? You want something you haven't seen before? Coming off of Money in the Bank, which, by the way, is a stadium show that is like 1 month removed from SummerSlam. 2 stadium shows, one at the beginning of July, one at the end of July. So what are you going to do? Paul Heyman is going to announce that he still represents the tribal chief, and that tribal chief is none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The Rock says that he's heard Roman Reigns running his mouth for the last 2 years about how he's the head of the table, about how he's the one putting food on the table of the Anoa'i family. And then he goes, bitch, I got $1 billion tequila company. What food are you putting on my table? Roman, you're not, there's levels to this, and you're not on my level. As far as the family tree goes, there's the tree house that you're in, and there's the mansion at the top of it that I live on. You're not on my level, Roman, and you know who knows that? The wise man, Paul Heyman. We go to SummerSlam with The Rock saying, Roman, it's time for me to prove this to the world. I'm coming to SummerSlam to embarrass you and to take the Universal Championship from you. And I'm going to do it with Paul Heyman by my side. And at SummerSlam, we see Roman Reigns versus The Rock. And The Rock is with Paul Heyman. Who isn't tuning in or buying a ticket to SummerSlam to see Paul Heyman and The Rock together? And guess what happens? Roman Reigns beats The Rock at SummerSlam. Roman Reigns wins, and Paul Heyman has no idea what to do. Now, while all this is going on, I said Drew McIntyre looked confused. Brock Lesnar looked happy. That's because Paul Heyman filled in Brock Lesnar, but Drew McIntyre was never a Paul Heyman guy. That's why it's key, way back at the SmackDown after WrestleMania, when Drew turned on Roman, that Paul Heyman wasn't involved in that whatsoever. Drew was on an island. Now, Drew feels like he was taken advantage of. Drew feels like he wasn't informed of all this. So, also going into SummerSlam, Drew has now turned back to being a babyface because he didn't like being taken advantage of. And you got Brock Lesnar versus Drew McIntyre in front of a full stadium, the way it was supposed to be. So that's what you've got for SummerSlam. Brock versus Drew. And Brock tells Paul Heyman, don't worry about this one, Paul. I'll handle this on my own. And then Rock with Paul Heyman versus Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns beats him and continues to hold the Universal Championship. Now, Seth Rollins does take the title off of Big E, whether it's at WrestleMania or whether it's at the pay-per-view after WrestleMania. Seth Rollins does become your WWE champion. So where does that leave us for Survivor Series? Survivor Series in November, 11 months removed from the Royal Rumble. Who were the last 2 men in the Royal Rumble? Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. 11 months later, they are both representing their respective brands as world champion. And at Survivor Series, that's your main event. Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. And that is where I see Roman Reigns going in 2022. Now, that's not to say that he won't turn heel again. That's not to say he and Paul Heyman won't be brought back together. There's a lot that can happen after 2022. This story is by no means over. But that's where I lay out Roman Reigns in 2022.